Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Up Your Brave interview. Today, I'm so thrilled to be talking to Faye Lawand. She's a registered clinical hypnotherapist, master NLP practitioner. We are going to be diving into the topic of how to deprogram yourself using hypnotic principles. Welcome back to the show, Faye.
Hi, Nat. It's so nice to be with you. It's great.
I am so excited to dive into this topic. It's very intriguing to me. For those of you that don't know Faye, she was one of my guests back in 2024. Faye is a seasoned expert in helping high achieving women in midlife to overcome their inner turmoil so that they can feel like themselves again. She's originally from the Middle East and has lived in 13 countries across 4 continents. Her personal journey is both inspiring and transformative. And she's now an internal conflict resolution expert, mentoring others in overcoming exhaustion, chronic pain, and overwhelm. Very common, I imagine. Her methods are modern, science backed, and designed to deliver results without relying on meditation, or extensive talk therapy. Very interesting. Her mission is simple yet powerful: to end the mental health pandemic that is quietly crippling lives by conquering inner turmoil and empowering women in midlife to live with joy, ease, and profound sense of unshakable well-being. That sounds good to me.
And key to that is understanding hypnotic principles and applying them in our lives in order to first deprogram the old limitations that are keeping us stuck and to program the new direction that we want to go in.
Well, that is a great place to start. I want
Yeah.
this interview, as all of mine are, to be empowering and visionary about the future. We're all navigating such fascinating times at the moment. Before we dive into the hypnotic principles, and maybe this relates, I would love you to share with us your personal experience. You live in Brisbane. You've recently experienced the cyclone. How was that for you?
Yes, that was very interesting because we haven't even been here a full year in that, right? So we're still kind of like feeling our way through the place, the environment, but also the climate. And I've never lived through a cyclone before. And leading up to the cyclone, the messaging was so powerfully fearful and so fear provoking. And with everything that I know, I found myself in the trap of fear for the first 2 to 3 hours. And it was like languaging, like the modeling suggests that. Sounds familiar, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Brace yourself for a damage and destruction that the mind cannot conceive of. So it was that dramatic language, those dramatic language patterns that created a frenzy, like in the supermarkets on the streets. And interestingly, in the supermarkets, the shelves were emptier than during the COVID years. And speaking to the attendants at the supermarket, they were also baffled. They said, like, we haven't even seen this even during the COVID years. And so after the first kind of 2 to 3 hours where I was very much wrapped up in the fear, right? I took a step back and it was that word modeling that really triggered it for me. And then thankfully, I was able to fall back and lean into what I know about the subconscious mind, what I know about programming, what I know about reprogramming in order to navigate the cyclone without that energy of fear and franticness that crippled the city. I mean, the city was in lockdown for a week. Initially, in the advent, like as we were waiting for Alfred to arrive, they were using the language lockdown. And because the modeling was wrong, obviously it was wrong, and Alfred was delayed in getting here, there was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of people that were very unhappy because from the Tuesday evening until the following Tuesdays for a week, a lot of businesses were shut down. And there were days where the weather was gorgeous, absolutely beautiful weather. So rightfully so, people were saying, we've shut down our businesses, we've shut down the city, there's no revenue coming in, we have to pay all of our employees. What is this for? And interestingly, then the languaging changed. So as we were waiting, initially Alfred was supposed to arrive like on the Wednesday night, Thursday, like on the night of Wednesday, Thursday. It didn't get here until like Saturday, Sunday. So we were in lockdown for 3 days, right, without Alfred. And so the language patterns changed. So from lockdown, the patterns were around the state of emergency continues until XYZ. And
I was
so,
going to ask you that.
yeah.
Did they say it was a state of emergency, and because of that terminology, they were then able to shut down the stores and the businesses?
Well, I mean, when you have, they were using the languaging of lockdown in order to get people into their homes because of an event involving the environment
Mm-hmm.
that was supposed to cripple the city and create like destruction to levels that were unheard of prior to this. And from what I understand, Brisbane is prone to flooding just because, it's subtropical, there's the river, the way things are built here. And I think in 2022, apparently there was a huge flood here in Brisbane, and it caught the government officials, it caught them by surprise. They were not properly planned, adequately planned, and there was a lot of destruction that happened to homes and businesses. And so that backlash, I think, factored into their over conservatism here, and they're over regulating the response to this particular event. So initially the languaging was lockdown, and then the languaging changed to state of emergency continues until it was until Tuesday. So it was from the Tuesday to the Tuesday. And it wasn't just the businesses that were shut down, and the schools and the banks and government institutions. It was also like the bridges, public transportation. And yes, it was that same energy, the same energy of fear and franticness that was so common during the COVID years. And one of the most important hypnotic principles that I think is really important to keep in mind, whether we are navigating, like right now, what we're dealing with what we're aware of in the freedom communities, but also just in life in general. The access point, the portal to the subconscious mind is through heightened emotion, right? Because the subconscious mind is not the rational, logical mind. The subconscious mind is our emotional mind. And as we know, the subconscious mind accounts for up to 91, 92% of our brain capacity or our mind capacity. So basically, we are in our subconscious most of our day, most of our week, most of our life. We are in our subconscious. And we're not even aware that we are in our subconscious, right? And there's reasons why we're wired this way, which we can get into down the track. But this subconscious mind that is the most powerful driver of our psychology and our behavior, the way that it's organized by emotion. It is a very emotional, highly emotive mind. And so in moments of heightened emotion and intense emotions, we are directly in our subconscious mind. So anything that we hear or anything that we're told in that heightened state of emotion goes directly into the subconscious mind, bypassing the critical filter of logic.
Right.
And so when we're using this hypnotic principle for ethical purposes and therapeutic purposes, like in clinical work that I do as a clinical hypnotherapist, of course, you're heightening, for example, the emotion of joy or the emotion of relaxation, and then you're providing the suggestions that the client wants to reprogram their reality, right? But in the context of what we experienced in 2020 and what we recently experienced here in Brisbane, it's the heightened emotion of fear. Yes. And then boom, the suggestion is stay indoors, or the suggestion is go out and get vaccinated, or the suggestion is if you don't get vaccinated, you're going to end up either in the ICU or in the crib or in the grave, which was, I woke up very, 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 with everything I know, I woke up so late in the playbook, Natalie, that even when we went into that last lockdown in Auckland, I was still very much playing by the rules, and I was still very much of the belief that, oh, Ardern is our savior, and we're just so lucky to have her. But there was something inside of me, despite all of that, that knew that I wasn't going to accept the COVID vaccine. And so when she came out about like 6 weeks into that last lockdown, and she said, we're all going to stay locked up and locked in until we get vaccinated. And at that time, the narrative was the pandemic is the pandemic of the unvaccinated. I actually believe that. So my internal my internal narrative was, okay, I'm going to end up either in ICU or in the grave because I'm not going to accept the COVID vaccine.
Wow. So at that point, let me just really
Yeah, yeah,
highlight
yeah,
this. You
please.
you genuinely believed it at that stage. Thank you
I
for your
believed
honesty.
I believed everything. Like it wasn't until November 16th of 2021. So like only about 4 weeks before the lockdown released that I woke up. And the waking up was it brought relief with it, but it's also quite excruciating to wake up, right? And I think this is why a lot of us in this freedom community, given what we've experienced, yes, of course, there's a sense of relief and pride and strength and courage, but there's so much other stuff that now we're aware of that is shaking our experience. And I think this is why a lot of us are experiencing symptoms of dysregulation. So many people that I speak to are anxious, they're overwhelmed, they're rumination, there's issues with chronic pain, there's issues with digestion, there's of course, part of it is the collective experience of dysregulation of what we're experiencing in the world around us. Of course, a lot of it is just, the wear and tear of life. But I think also a big part of it is that when your mind wakes up to one aspect of your reality that is chaotic and toxic and evil, that same mind now is looking at all of the other paradigms of toxicity and dysfunction. And that really, really can wear us down. And I think, speaking for myself, when I woke up, I with everything that I know, Nat, and I regularly go to therapy and I regularly work on myself. I had to really up my therapy sessions because so much came out. It wasn't just the anger and the deceit, but it's all the other areas of life that kind of have been shrouded with that eyes closed experience that now I was seeing. And the seeing can sometimes be, although it's very curative, it actually can be quite confronting and quite painful. And this is why I'm really passionate to share this with our community, because I think it's important to understand not only how this is all happening, but how it's impacting us and what we can do about it. Because I think moving forward, this is just going to get uglier and uglier. Like I don't see the intensity being dialed down. I think it's quite the opposite.
Well, it's interesting time for us to be having this discussion because at the
Yeah.
moment they are taking submissions for the COVID inquiry, the round 2, which I will definitely be putting my thoughts forward. And so a lot of people are remembering, right? They're remembering what went on. They're remembering the, being kept outside of the cafes and the restaurants, but also the way that people treated them. However, what I've experienced is it's still going on. What I'm experiencing is there's so many people in my life, while the majority of the people I spend my time and energy with and on are like you, meaning awake to what is going on, and we can have fluid and fascinating conversations. There are a handful of close people who cannot see anything. What about those people, and how can we support them, and how can I support myself?
Yeah, well, look, this is a hard one. I think because all of us have had that experience where we've been on the receiving end of a lot of vitriol and judgment for the decisions that we made, but also
And I
now
wrote down in
moving.
my notes and interrogation and attacking, and still
Oh
to
yeah.
this day.
Oh, completely. But also we've also been on the receiving end of like gaslighting experiences, right? By the our environment, the community, and the medical community. For those of us like myself, my husband is vax injured. He was at hospital 2 times, Nat. After he got his second dose of the vaccine, he ended up with amnesia. It's called transient global amnesia. And they can't explain it, they said, but they said, oh, ever since COVID, we've seen a higher level of people presenting with this condition. And they said, oh, we think it may have something to do with the spike protein. Well, yeah, no kidding, right? So this what I'm trying to do is like I'm trying to normalize that we've all have had these experiences, continue to have these experiences. And part of it is, you know, when you understand that one of the functions of the subconscious mind is to hold on to memories and emotions for protective purposes. I think it helps me to have more compassion for people on the other side who are unwilling and unable, actually, they're unable to see the world the way you and I see it, because their mind, their subconscious mind, is still in the protective space of protecting them, protecting their memories and their experiences from all of that harm and that emotional intensity. And, you know, the thing is, the mind will always hold on to emotions and memories that it perceives we can't handle in order to protect us. So, you know, the point that I'm trying to make here is it is not them, it is their mind that is acting in a protective way. And understanding that, for me, helps to bring a little element of compassion to people who actually have been very, very harmful and very, very, very damaging in my life. We've all had a lot of these damaging experiences with our relationships in our life. It helps me bring a level of compassion, but also a level of freedom, that it's not me, it's just their mind and their brain doing what it does because of its wiring. Like, it's not personal.
I love that. I wrote it down. It definitely feels personal, but I hear you.
It's of course it feels personal, because let's go back to what we just said a few moments ago about the subconscious mind is our emotional mind, it's our emotive mind. So when we're met with, and when we encounter, elevated emotions, intense emotions,
Mm-hmm.
it puts us right back into our subconscious mind and into our programming. I mean, the subconscious mind is the space of the container for, like, our programming, our beliefs, our instincts, our fears, our memories, all of that stuff. So of course it brings up a lot of stuff for us, which is why it's so important, I think more important than ever, for everyone on the planet, but particularly for us in our community, to continue to do the inner work,
Mm-hmm.
to let go of all of that, the programming from the old paradigm, in order to clear up enough space for us to hold the new reality, and to hold the people around us that we that need some support and need some lifting and need some guidance moving forward.
Well, that's fascinating that you mentioned that. A few weeks ago, I did a 9-day liver detox along with Carrie Dell, who's one of my previous guests. She's an amazing health coach, and followed on by that. It wasn't planned, but it just fluidly flowed into me being at Spirit Fest for 4 days with my essential oils. And I was walking barefoot for 4 days, sleeping on the ground, like in my marquee with my oils, and listening to high frequency music, going to sound baths. When I could get relief from my stall, I would duck out, do a breath workshop or something like that. So I agree. I feel like not only people that are awake, but everybody, I think, can benefit from doing some sort of healing modalities that nurture you, whether that's literally sitting in your backyard with your back against a tree and writing in a journal, or going to see some sort of, EFT healer or whatever. Some people may roll their eyes, but more and more people are becoming aware of these modalities to help us navigate through, which is such a fascinating time. I always tell my kids, you guys are gonna look back and be so amazed at this time we're living through
Yes.
right now. What are your thoughts on that in terms of other ways people can support themselves at the moment?
If you remember our conversation from a few years ago, I'm such a huge preacher about digital discipline. Like, I just think, and again, this ties into hypnotic principles, right? The We access the subconscious mind in a few ways, right? One of the ways we access it, we just spoke about, is with intensified emotions, right? But another way that we access the subconscious mind is when brainwave frequency slows down, right? So at least 2 times a day, each and every single day, our brain, because of the circadian rhythms, right, is starting to slow down or to speed up. So that state of transitional awareness right before you drift off to sleep at night, which is called hypnagogia, and that state of transitional awareness, just as you're like awakening from slumber into a more conscious state of awareness, which is called hypnopompia, your brainwave frequencies are slow. When brainwave frequencies are slow, you have direct access to the receptive, programmable subconscious mind. So, just to take a little detour, and then I'm going to come back to this. This is why a lot of times you hear politicians slowing down their speech, right? Mm-hmm. Because of this understanding, right? That the slower you speak, the slower the brainwave frequencies are going to be, and the more accessible the subconscious mind of the recipient is going to be. So, in those moments of slower brainwave frequencies, if we are externalized and if we are on our phones, on our emails, consuming news, consuming digital media, we are basically programming our subconscious mind to what we are seeing during those moments of crucial awareness. So we end up, taking on the agendas of the other person. We end up taking the emotions of the other person, the opinions of the other person, the thoughts and the beliefs of the other person, and we're not even aware of it. We're not even aware of it. So one of the analogies and the metaphors that I came across from actually on social media is, would you ever go to bed with 100 people in your room? And how would you feel if you woke up in the morning and there was 100 people looking over your bed? And of course, people laugh. And of course, it's a ridiculous analogy and it's a ridiculous metaphor because nobody would really do it. But in essence, that's what happens when during those really sacred moments of our consciousness, we are on our phones either right before we drift off or right after we wake up in the morning. So that I'm so passionate about educating people about these two times of awareness, so that they'll utilize that time for more empowering purposes, and utilize that time for more constructive purposes that connect them with their internal reality and what they want to feel and experience and think on the inside. So that's like point number one in terms of what I think any of us can do on the planet right now. It doesn't cost you money and it doesn't cost you time.
And on that, I just got to jump in because from what you said earlier, and I love to give people memorable tips. What I was thinking, so when you're scared or things are slow, you're like a sponge. So there's the 3 S's, right? So it's like scared or slow. We become like a sponge, like we just absorb it. The filter is gone. And it's a very opportune time to absorb positive things, but it's a very, dangerous or volatile time because you can be fed certain beliefs and views and propaganda and whatever, and you don't even realize that you're just absorbing it like a sponge.
Totally. And speaking of absorbing like propaganda and being in the subconscious mind, I think that's also a good time to touch upon like what's happening when we're watching movies, for example. And another way that we access the subconscious mind, or not even that we are in the subconscious mind, because we're in the subconscious mind at least, most of the day, and most of our lifetime we're in the subconscious mind. And that's why we talk about being conscious, right? Because we're waking up from the programming and we're waking up from being on autopilot and from the conditioning. So another time that we are in the subconscious and we don't even realize it is when we're watching movies, when we're watching TV. It's that feeling like when your body is like really heavy, like you can't be bothered to move. You're very aware. You can hear everything that's going on around you, right? You know that you can get up if you need to, but there's a feeling in the body that you kind of can't be bothered to move. You are in the subconscious. And also it's when there's fixation of the eyes on a particular point. You think about a lot of people when they think about hypnosis, they think about like the pendulum, right?
Yeah.
Growing up in the 70s, that's what I thought hypnosis was. Part of what I do in a clinical setting for therapeutic purposes, to access the subconscious mind for therapeutic purposes, is absolutely work with the gaze and work with the eyes, because they're so innervated, right? So it makes sense that you would use the eyes and the gaze in order to access quickly the subconscious mind to reprogram for empowering purposes. So coming back to the TV, and when you're watching a screen, well, whether you're watching a movie, whether you're watching TV, or even whether you're scrolling, when there's that fixation on a particular object, you are in your subconscious mind, right? You also think that when you're watching a movie, let's say you're watching like an action movie or a horror movie, your conscious mind knows that you're in a safe place. But how many times have you or your listeners, you've been watching a horror movie or an action movie, and your imaginative mind takes on that reality to be true, your body believes it to be true, and you start exhibiting that physiology of anxiety and fear, like your hands become sweaty, your heart starts beating, because you're feeling and imagining, because you're in your subconscious, right? What is being projected on the screen. So it becomes really important to be aware of that this is happening. And interestingly, also when I woke up from November the 16th, 2021 onwards, I mean, it's just the amount of things that have come into my awareness. And now it's like, my gosh, knowing what I know as a hypnotherapist, it all makes so much sense. One of the things that I learned during that time was about television, and like how television is used as a tool of programming and a tool of conditioning, right? Because it's telling you the vision that someone else, an agency or an organization wants you to believe to be true. And you think about, like, look, I have no problem with diversity whatsoever. I have a lot of friends who are in same-sex couples. My brother, who's one of my dearest people on the planet, is in a same-sex marriage, actually. I don't have an issue with that. However, if you think about how, since the pandemic, on Netflix, just the plethora of imagery, it's not just themes. It's of course the themes of like same-sex and trans, but it's also the imagery, the same-sex scenes, the lovemaking scenes, all of that. You think about how that kind of took off since we're all stuck in our homes.
I'll tell you, it's even posters on the wall. Like you might be watching a show about kids at high school, and there's this poster on the wall on the locker behind them. It's fascinating. Once you see it everywhere.
Right? And again, that's based on the principle of repetition, because one of the functions of the subconscious mind is it works on repetition. It is the part of our mind that was necessary for us to, come into full survival. That's why the first 7 years of our life, we are in delta brainwave frequency. Delta brainwave frequency is basically our programmable mind, right? And we need to be in that state in order to absorb and learn everything that we need to learn about the world in order to survive, right? And so a lot of what we learn and absorb during those years in delta brainwave frequency is then become what we end up repeating, right? So anything that is repeated, anything that is repetitive is going directly to the subconscious mind, and it ends up being normalized. And now when things become normalized, they end up being perceived as safe and trustworthy by the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, its number one job is to keep you alive, right? So it's always looking for cues of safety in your environment. Now, safety isn't what you and I in a conscious kind of way would associate with a lack of, with like being positive. Safety is, yes, it's lack of threat, but safety is also what is familiar. And so the more it's normalized, and the more we are fed constantly that imagery, that cueing, that those scenes, the more it's accepted as true and real and okay by the part of our mind that doesn't question the world, the part of our mind that takes the world at face value and works on autopilot.
Absolutely. And same thing in the music industry with what they're
Yeah.
saying and what they're wearing. It is so fascinating. So I guess you almost touched on it there. I was going to ask you, how can we spot, how can we spot this programming that is happening all around us? What are some of the
Yeah.
cues? You already mentioned a few.
Yeah, I think number one, really important, Nat, is to, be aware that be aware of like, the principles we've been talking about. I think it all starts with awareness, right? One of my mentors says awareness is curative, and I could not agree more. You can't change or be conscious of something that you're not aware of. So the awareness piece, I think, is the first step. I think the second step also is being in those moments that we talked about where there's direct access to the subconscious mind, like when we're in a heightened emotional state, when we are right before we drift off, right when we wake up in the morning, when we are watching TV, when we're watching a movie, when we're scrolling. It becomes really important to be even more aware. And the best way to do that is to become embodied, like to feel your body. Don't dissociate, right? Like come back into the body, feel the support, the physical support underneath your body. Feel your body in space. Doing that brings you back into your center, and you're not kind of like being sucked into the subconscious agenda. The other thing to be aware of, and this was used so skillfully during the pandemic, is authority as well. So another way that the subconscious mind gets accessed very quickly and programmed and imprinted is by figures of authority. And you think about just what we were talking about moments ago, when we are in the early years of our life, in order to survive, we need to learn how the world works. And so we do that by observing the older people around us. Because from a bioevolutionary perspective, those people around us, the older people, they've survived. So they obviously have the code for living, the code for survival, right? And so we don't question, in the first 7 years of our life, we don't question our parents, we don't question, figures at school, religious figures. And this is why so many of us, we end up taking on belief systems that are very, not just unhelpful and untrue, but are very, very limiting because of that authority piece. Now, that then gets continued, not just in schools. I mean, schools are complete environment of programming, huge environment for conditioning. And this is coming from a former school teacher, right? I mean, I didn't know this. I didn't know this when I was in school. Now, when I think back to some of the environments, some of the experiences I was in and that I involved my students in, I'm like, my God, Faye, like the repentance I have to do for that. So, but then there's also the medical side of things, because we also don't question doctors, right? Well, I mean, now we do, people in our environment do, but generally speaking, we don't question authority figures. And you think back about what was happening at 1 p.m. every single day in New Zealand, you have the trifecta. It was the heightened emotion, it was the repetition, right? The repetition, 1 p.m., it's the predictability of like the flags, the podiums, and also the predictability of the opening lines. Kia ora, I can't really say that. It was Bloomfield's signature hello. Kia ora. Yeah, you know the one that I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And interestingly, I don't know if you heard him on Stuff, his interview on Stuff a few days ago. No, it was actually at the end of March to coincide with the 5-year anniversary of when we went into lockdown. And the interviewer asked him about that signature greeting of his, and he repeated it. And if I ever had any doubt in my mind about this man, what he knows and he doesn't know, it got confirmed on that day. Because after he repeated it, he then went on to say, this is not a COVID alert update. He knows because our minds were anchored to his kia ora, blah, blah. And our minds were predicting the danger, the chaos that he was going to announce. So we have the trifecta. Coming back to the trifecta, we've got the heightened emotion, we've got the repetition, but we also have the authority, right? It's the authority. He's wearing his suit and tie. He's, buddy with the prime minister. He's the director of health. He's talking in that authoritative tone of the science suggests, the modeling suggests. That's authority. The modeling suggests, right? The research suggests, the science suggests. So I think being aware of that trifecta as well is really, really important to dehypnotize and also to hypnotize. So it's kind of like if you flip it around then, okay, who are then the authorities that you want to be listening to? Like what paradigms of reality do you want to align yourself with? And so be more open and receptive to that. And you kind of like allow that to flood your body as well. Flipping it around as well, it's also, well, what sort of things you want to be repeating to yourself? What sorts of behaviors do you want to be repeating? What sorts of experiences do you want to be repeating? And the emotion piece, well, what sort of emotions do you want to be experiencing? And how can you start bringing them into your reality on a daily basis in a very intentional way, Nat? And just one last thing about like the authority, about all the trifecta, and also particularly around the authority, it's like, those beliefs that we have, like really challenging them and becoming curious about them, like not with anger, like not with blame that, oh, it's, my fourth grade teacher, said that, therefore, she's an XYZ, or my parents did this, or my priest said this, or the government said that. I think it's when we come with anything in our world and in our experience with a spirit of curiosity, it also loosens the hold that those unhelpful toxic paradigms have over us, and it puts us into another part of our brain that can see possibility, that isn't about like black or white and isn't about rigid thinking. And so when we get curious about, well, I wonder where this came from, I wonder what this is about, I wonder whose voice this is that's telling me that, instead of just taking things at face value and being reactive and being angry about what we're receiving, can be really helpful for us to start dehypnotizing ourselves from those old paradigms that we never really questioned.
Well, it's interesting if people think about what we call some of the current threats that RCR dives into. We've had the documentary series RCR 360. And one that comes to mind, I had a quick look at it the other day, was Managed Retreat is the name of the documentary. And it's talking about climate change, right? And once we see what we can see the trifecta of the messaging and the fear mongering and such. Also with the economy, also with the SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals. I feel like you've given us some good tools today to look through a new lens and see this trifecta and identifying it. And that way we can shift the way that we absorb, not be such a sponge, shift the way that we absorb or are curious, I guess, about the information that's coming
and
our way.
reshape what we want to believe and how we want to be moving forward. Because that's the other wonderful thing about understanding deprogramming and reprogramming. It's like, okay, now that we know what we know about the subconscious mind, it's the autopilot, it's the repetitive part of our mind. Yes, it does repeat the toxicity, but it can also repeat new expressions of reality that we want to have when we know how to actually program it. And now we know it's through heightened emotion. So in this case, heightened positive emotion, through repeating a new version of reality that we want to experience or become or be. And of course, you can bring in that aspect of authority. And the biggest aspect of authority is you. You know, it's your
Mhm.
sovereignty. This is like what you want to believe. This is like how you want to show up in the world without interference and noise from other people and also like past experiences.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. It's that inner authority and recognizing that we don't just have to look to somebody to tell us what to think. It's an exciting time of change, definitely. In terms of the
And
vision,
uncomfortable, but uncomfortable.
yeah.
Growth and comfort can't coexist. They can't coexist. These are the growing pains. It's an extremely uncomfortable time, but it's also a time where we know that something wonderful awaits us on the other side. It just becomes even more important for us to band together, but also to band within, to band within the internal mechanisms that are wired into all of us that can really propel us forward.
One thing that I want to highlight is or reflect on is, especially at this time, and I did have someone say to me the other day, it was 5 years ago, I can see that you're still harboring anger. Why can't you just move on? That. And I'm sure we've all received comments similar. I feel like part of it is because now that we can see that pattern, it's not just COVID, we can see this trifecta and we can see how, and I say to this person, I just take everything with a grain of salt. Now I don't like, she's like, oh, did you hear about the earthquake in Myanmar? And I'm like, yes, but I even take even the stats around it and the how and the why. I just take it all with a grain of salt. That's just who I've become as a result, actually, of the COVID experience. What are your thoughts on
And
that in
being
terms of people going like, just move on? We've all moved past it. Why are you still clinging to this?
Yeah. I go back to what we were speaking about a little bit earlier, Nat, when we're talking about like how people in our community have really taken this. It's been traumatizing for many reasons for people in our community. What I've experienced from myself, from my observation, and also from the clients that come to see me is that lingering anger, that lingering fear, that lingering bitterness. A lot of times, I'm not saying this is what's happening for you. Could be because of unresolved anger, bitterness, disappointment from other experiences in the past that haven't been dealt with. And then this comes along. And because again, we go back to the emotive mind, right? The way that the subconscious mind organizes and stores memories is either chronological or by emotion, right? So if, for example, that folder that houses, let's say, anger, was already overloaded before we came into an experience that was very appropriately anger provoking, then all of those other unresolved experiences, emotions, and memories that carry the label anger are being brought to the surface. And this is why so many of us, I'm going to speak about myself here. This is why right after on November 16th, when I woke up, there was so much anger and disillusionment and disappointment. Of course, a lot of it was appropriate, but a lot of it wasn't as well. And I know because of the work that I did and what I know, that it just brought to the surface and triggered a lot of unresolved experiences of anger, bitterness, and disappointment. And so, what I say with a lot of love and a lot of respect to people many years later is maybe consider to what extent this is an opportunity for you to look at other areas in your life where maybe the anger hasn't been resolved. Yeah. So that's what I would say to that. And I
I
know I say
absolutely.
this with love and respect and with a lot of respect because I know it will be received with the intent in which it's coming from.
And I absolutely agree. And I also see that from the other perspective when some people are so angry at us for questioning things.
Yes,
Or even
100%.
I've even said to someone in my life, like, why are you so angry about holistic health or healers? Like, did something happen in your past? Like, why are you so fired up about it? So I agree with you. A lot of this stuff is so emotive and it triggers memories from the past or even subconscious stuff that we don't realize. And it brings up opportunities for us to process, right? Or shove it back down again, depending on how we respond. I absolutely agree.
And here's a principle maybe that might be helpful for your listeners. There's this one of the universal laws, if you want to call it, is the law of vacuum prosperity. So this law actually was coined by one of the money people in the early part of last century, in the 1920s. I forget the name of. It's not the guy from Think Rich and Grow Rich, but it's one of those. Anyway, it's the principle actually applies to any area of our growth or any area of our transformation. So what this law says is the way the universe is organized, everything has its place because of divine intelligence, right? And so anytime that there's a space in the universe, it will always get filled, but it will always get filled with something positive and something that promotes goodness for the whole, right? And so if we apply that principle to our journey, and particularly like our inner healing journey, when we remove something that has taken up a lot of space, like a phobia from the past or a trauma from the past, or toxic anger or intense fear or whatever, or anxiety or whatever it is that we've been carrying that we're not even aware of, right? Something magical happens without us even going out and searching for it. Because of this law of vacuum prosperity, the universe then goes in and fills it with something that's good for us and something that it knows that we want. And this is what I think is so magical about doing this work and being alive at this time, because it's very excruciating at times. It can be very dark at times. But as we start to shed the spotlight on the darkness and the darkness shifts, then there's quite literally space for the light to come in and the light to hold, right? And the light to actually spread on the inside. And so I guess that's a message for, I know that a lot of people here are receptive to hearing this message of using this time as an opportunity to heal the past so that we can prepare our bodies and our minds and our lives for the light that awaits us as we move forward.
I love the thought of that. All right, I'm going to wrap things up. But before I do, I would love to ask you, well, first, I'll ask our listeners if what is resonating for you. Do you have any aha moments or anything you want to share? You can send us a text, 2057. You can send us an email, inbox@realitycheck.radio. And for you, Faye, before you go, I would love to know if you were to truly up your brave in 2025, what would you do or not do?
Yeah, so what I'm doing this year, after I come back from Montreal, actually, because I'm going to Montreal. I haven't been back to Montreal since COVID. So it's going to be very interesting to see, Canada with this lens in a, post-COVID world. So when I come back, I am committing to a Soft 75 challenge. I don't know if you've heard about the Soft 75 challenge. So it's really, really interesting. It's basically about, for 75 days, committing to 5 principles. So it's like finding a new method of eating clean that works for you. So whatever that is. So for me, it's like eliminating the seed oils. Already I'm gluten-free and dairy-free. So it's eliminating the seed oils, and also, getting really consistent for 75 days with intermittent fasting. It's also increasing your intake of water. It's also reading 10 pages of nonfiction every single day. And it has to be an actual book, like an actual paper, not like on a Kindle. It also involves a daily exercise of 45 minutes. And it involves no alcohol except on social occasions. So that's why I'm waiting till I come back from Canada. So that's what I'm doing to up my brave. Now, the reason that I'm doing that, other than for the obvious health benefits, it's to actually strengthen the muscle of mental discipline. because during the research says, well, we also know it, like we're going to be tempted, right? And anytime that we're tempted, like when we say, oh, for example, I'm not going to drink alcohol, right? There's a moment where we're in a situation where we're tempted. There's a voice inside of our head that says, oh, come on, go ahead and have it. Another voice that says, no, actually, I've made this decision. I want to stick to it. So the idea behind, the research says the idea behind the soft 75 is so that that voice that knows that you've committed to this and why you've committed to this gets stronger and stronger, and eventually is able to dull down and silence that other voice that's coming from the autopilot, the autopilot subconscious repetitive mind. So that's what I'm doing to up my brave when I come back from Canada in June.
Well, that sounds amazing. I think you'll excel at that. It's very cool. I only did my 9-day detox, but I know what you mean. I'm just very I'm very cut and dry. So I'm like, this is what I can have, this is what I can't have, and I just stuck to it. But yeah, it wasn't easy. But yeah, I'm sure you'll do great on your 75. What else is coming up from you? Maybe from a business perspective, what is coming up for you, and how can people connect with you if they want to find you or follow you online?
Yeah, so it's just my name, Faye Lawand, on everything, like my website, which I'm redoing, by the way, and hopefully it will be redone by the time you guys hear this. So it's Faye Lawand's Instagram, Facebook,
I'm going
LinkedIn.
to
It's
spell
just
it
Faye Lawand.
Faye Lawand,
Yes.
Lawand, Faye
Yeah, so you
Lawand.
just think about Lawand, wand, magic, because there's something magical about working with the subconscious mind, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
where all the magic is created and stored. So maybe that could be a little mnemonic. And I actually have a course called Crack the Secrets of the Subconscious Mind. If your listeners want to go deeper on this and get like all the templates and the recordings to help, embody this in their own life. And of course, there's always those opportunities to get like some guidance working with the subconscious mind to resolve your inner conflicts in a one-on-one format. So if you just get in touch, I'll be more than happy to connect you with the best way forward.
Sounds amazing. Was it .com?
Yeah, .com. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. All right, before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Not at all, Nat. I just want to say thank you to you for doing what you do and what you continue to do so well. And always wonderful to connect with you. And thanks for having me on.
Well, it's been amazing to reconnect with you. I did have someone come up to me the other day. She said, "Oh, you're from that radio show." She said, "You guys saved me during the COVID years." I was like, oh my goodness. And we actually get that a lot, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I know that COVID years have come and gone, but kind of it, as we mentioned today, life rolls on, and we can now see these patterns, and we can maybe identify that trifecta and be more proactive about how we reprogram ourselves and what we absorb and what we envision for ourselves. So thank you so much for everything you shared with us
Total
today.
pleasure. Total pleasure, Nat. Thank you. Talk
All
to you
right.
soon.
You
Bye.
too. Thanks everyone for listening.